Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. I want to be very clear. We will make a decision to shoot down flying objects without discussion when they violate our territory and fly over Poland. There's no room for debate here, said Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk amid mounting pressure from continuous Russian violations of Allied airspaces. We will be bringing you more on that later in the program, but first, let's see our other top headlines of today. Moldova fights back against Russian election interference. The future of social benefits for Ukrainians living in Poland to be reconsidered. And finally, Polish players in the running for football's most prestigious prize, the Ballon d'Or. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk made his stance clear. There is no room for debate when it comes to maintaining Polish security in face of recurring Russian incursions. His statement comes against the backdrop of an emergency UN Security Council meeting requested by Estonia after a serious airspace violation in which 3 Russian jets entered the country's airspace for an extended period last week. And this is just one of several incursions Russia is guilty of in the last few days in multiple locations. Aisha Badji has more on our top story.
Poland will not hesitate to defend its skies, said Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, warning that Warsaw is ready to, quote, take any decision against airspace violations.
We are ready for any decision aimed at destroying objects that may threaten us, such as Russian fighter jets, if they, for example, fly over our territorial waters.
As Poland reacts to Russian hybrid warfare, so does the international community. Across the Atlantic, the UN Security Council was called into session by Estonia to address what Tallinn says was a dangerous breach of its airspace on Friday. 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets entered NATO skies and remained there for 12 minutes.
We are here today because this incident concerns not only Estonia, but the entire international community. This outrageous violation of the territorial integrity of Estonia was preceded by Russian drones violating the airspace of Poland and Romania a short while ago.
If these were accidents, why not immediately acknowledge them and apologize? We have given Russia a pass in the past in such circumstances. But we have not heard any apologies, only lies.
This marks the second UN Security Council emergency meeting on Russia in just 10 days. Poland requested the first after Russian drones crossed into its territory overnight on September 10th, penetrating deep into Polish airspace. Days later, Romania reported another incursion. On Sunday, German Eurofighter jets scrambled to intercept a Russian reconnaissance plane over the Baltic, whose transponder switched off and ignored all calls. Moscow dismisses the claims.
Эта паранойя достигает невиданных высот.
But with repeated incidents, NATO interceptions and Russian denials, many say deterrence still looks shaky.
The fact that President Trump does not seem to be willing to really inflict any kind of consequences on Russia for anything for the last 8 months, I think that also is what emboldens them.
And that this ambiguity only benefits Moscow.
They understand only, I think, a strong approach. Just to remind you that a couple of years ago, Turkey hit one Russian plane, and that response was pretty visible and sound, and Russia did nothing. So they stopped their flights in vicinity of Turkish border, and no violations happened after that.
Late on Sunday, Trump was asked if he would help defend Poland or the Baltics if attacked by Russia.
Yeah, I would.
But as violations mount, the pressure is shifting from statements to action. For NATO, credibility may soon hinge not on words, but on what happens next time a Russian jet crosses the line.
I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. You have been warned.
For TVP World, I'm Aisha Badji.
And now let's revisit one of the most burning topics of weeks past. A bill that would extend the right of Ukrainians to reside and work in Poland is headed to the desk of Polish President Karol Nawrocki. The president had already vetoed the first version of the bill in August, and another veto this time could complicate the lives of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians living in Poland and affect the Polish economy. Maciej Wilowski has the details.
A bill that would extend Ukrainians' right to reside and work in Poland is headed to the desk of Polish President Karol Nawrocki. Nawrocki had vetoed the original version last month, stating that the social benefits it provided Ukrainians, including those who aren't working, were too generous. Another veto could cause problems for Ukrainians living in Poland. And paradoxically, Ukrainians who arrived in Poland before Russia's full-scale invasion, often as guest workers, could feel the biggest impact. Under the bill, residence permits for this group of Ukrainians would be extended until March 4th, 2026. If the bill is vetoed, no such extension would take place, requiring hundreds of thousands of people to file for new residence permits. That could cause delays, which could take months to resolve. However, for those who came to Poland after Russia's full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, a veto might not change much in their lives. That's because of the EU's Temporary Protection Directive, which gives Ukrainian war refugees the right to temporary residence in all EU countries through 2027. And even if the bill is vetoed, it's unlikely that Ukrainians will start heading home in large numbers.
What we see that we're not, as our organization, we're not expecting people from Poland to come back to Ukraine, because we're still we're still working with a big influx of still people coming from the occupied territories or from the territories that are border the front line, and the front line is always changing.
Ukraine is grappling with a housing shortage and surging numbers of internally displaced people.
I'm scared to think about some influx of people from Poland, because we still have a big issue with internal displaced people from the occupied territories and from territories that are very close to the front line.
Ukrainian refugees have boosted Poland's economy, and many have made a permanent home here. Research from Deloitte shows that Ukrainian refugees generated almost 3% of Poland's GDP in 2024. 69% of refugees are actively employed, not far below the 75% share of Polish citizens overall. Many are also highly skilled. Among working-age refugees, 40% have completed some level of higher education, above the 38% share of Polish citizens who have done the same. A presidential veto could create an uncertain future for countless Ukrainians living in Poland, but given the situation back home, a mass exodus of people is unlikely for the time being. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
Moldova, a country where the pro-EU and pro-Russia sentiments collide, especially now when the parliamentary elections are afoot and Russia is accused of meddling with the upcoming vote, trying to influence the outcome and try to push Moldova into Russia's orbit. Is Moldova going to Kremlin-proof itself in time for the election? Anastasia Yanchenko went out looking for an answer in her latest report.
Moldova is one step closer toward EU accession. Today, the Republic of Moldova reached another important milestone on its EU path. In just over a year, it has completed the screening process of legislation. Once again, Moldova shows it is ready for the next stage of EU accession. Situated between Ukraine and Romania, with a population of around 3 million, Moldova has become a key battleground between pro-EU and pro-Russian forces. A document quoted by Bloomberg reveals a Kremlin-backed strategy to influence Moldova, recruiting voters abroad, staging protests and spreading disinformation online, all in an attempt to turn the country away from Europe.
Whether Russia destabilizes us, pulls us away from Europe and turns us into a threat on the Ukraine's southwestern border and Europe's eastern frontier.
The ruling Democratic Party, Party of Action and Solidarity, led by President Maia Sandu, faces by far the largest number of daily waves of disinformation directed against it, according to its members.
We are increasingly feeling the Russian interventions and interference in upcoming parliamentary election now. Fake content, a huge number of online bots that help spread that contribute spreading the fake disinformation narratives.
The Moldovan authorities are fighting against Russian vote buying every day, with over 100 sites raided on Monday alone. This month, over 60 locations have been searched, yielding cash, documents, and Russian bank cards, showing Moscow's effort to influence public opinion.
The searches are related to a criminal case into the preparation of mass riots and destabilization, which were coordinated from the Russian Federation through criminal elements.
Since the beginning of 2025, content from pro-Russian accounts online has received over 23 million views and 860,000 likes in a country with a population of just 2.4 million.
Many Russian-speaking people who really, some of them, they really follow the Russian line.
This is not the first time Russia has tried to influence the country's voters. In October 2024, Moldova held a constitutional referendum to amend the constitution to include EU accession as a national goal. The referendum passed by a narrow margin, with 50.39% voting in favor and 49.61% voting against. Party members strongly believe that Russia's intense anti-EU campaign was the reason for such a close result.
We've documented, and police documented, more than 120,000 cases of vote buying. And that's almost 10% of the vote. Russia and Russian proxies in Moldova are targeting the most poor people, the most in need, trying to buy their vote.
If the pro-Russian opposition wins the ballot, Chișinău's future accession to the European Union could be called into question. Anastasia Yanchenko, TVP World.
This past weekend, protesters took to the streets of Hungary's capital to voice their opposition to the government's use of public money to spread the ruling party's anti-EU and anti-opposition message. With both public and private media mostly under the control of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the opposition claims the campaign for next year's parliamentary elections is unlikely to be fair. Michiel von Blumestein reports.
Tens of thousands gathered in Budapest's Hero Square on Sunday. And they have had enough.
They spend money on billboards and adverts inciting hatred, lies and totally senseless national consultations based on manipulation.
The opposition accuses the government of campaigning against the European Union, American philanthropist George Soros, and the domestic opposition, all under the guise of public information and leveraging public as well as private media controlled by loyalists of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán.
2 weeks ago, they fabricated a total lie using a document which is fabricated and is not from us, not from the TISA party, the main opposition party, expressing that we are planning to raise income taxes. And in the contrary, we are planning to lower income tax.
In a few weeks, the Orbán government is holding a so-called national consultation, this time on taxes. A similar referendum on Ukraine's EU membership bid earlier this summer cost approximately 28 million euros. In the polls, Orbán's Fidesz party is trailing the center-right opposition party TISA of Peter Magyar. A surge in government spending for campaign purposes creates an uneven playing field, opposition politicians argue.
We, of course, don't have that much money, which the government has. Just to tell you, to smear me and to spread false information about me, the government spent several million euros on social media to spread false news just about my personality.
The parliamentary elections in Hungary are expected to be held in April next year.
Péter Magyar, the leader of TISA, the largest Hungarian opposition party, has announced that on October 23rd, the group will hold its biggest ever public event yet. This trophy is every footballer's greatest dream and a symbol of their professional achievement. This Monday evening, all eyes will be on Paris, where the Ballon d'Or for the best football player of the 2024-25 season will be awarded. Two Polish players, including Robert Lewandowski, are on the list of nominees. While they may not be favorites to win, one Barcelona's superstar is likely to make history. Jan Kennedy has more on this story.
Football's biggest stars gather at the Théâtre du Châtelet in Paris for the 56th edition of the Ballon d'Or. Polish national team captain and Barcelona striker Robert Lewandowski, whose goals led the Catalan club to a Spanish championship, finished 17th.
Even at Barcelona, you would find perhaps not as efficient performers, but players that caught eye of worldwide public.
Lewandowski's teammates, Spanish teenage sensation Lamine Yamal and Brazil's Rafinha, are strong contenders. But missing out on last season's biggest trophies has kept them from being considered favourites.
Because of the new rules of the Ballon d'Or award being like a season award rather than yearly award, it means that we have to look at who was previous season's best player at the best leagues in the world, at Champions League and Club World Cup.
That's why the bookies are backing France's Ousmane Dembélé to win. The 28-year-old's electrifying form led Paris Saint-Germain to 4 trophies last season, including the club's first Champions League title. Polish fans will watch the female awards closely, with national team captain Ewa Pajor on the shortlist. Scoring 52 goals for club and country, the Barcelona striker is on track to become the first woman to win the Gerd Müller Trophy, awarded for the most goals in a season. And experts believe this is the only start of her success.
I hope that Eva will develop further at Barcelona, and even with those great numbers of the first season, I would say that we can expect more, because that's how talented she is as a goal scorer.
With 7 goals and assists to her name 3 weeks into the new season, Pajor will fancy her chances for next year's biggest prizes. For TVP World, Jan Kennedy.
And now back to our top story of today. After a barrage of airspace violations committed by Russia, NATO member state representatives are calling for more severe means of dealing with the aircrafts that partake in the violations. Is this dangerous escalation orchestrated by Russia going to lead to greater NATO involvement in the region? Diane Francis, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joins me now to discuss the latest. Good evening, and thank you for joining me on the program.
Happy to be here.
So I would like to start by revisiting the quote that we brought up in the service earlier today. I want to be very clear. We will make a decision to shoot down flying objects without discussion when they violate our territory and fly over Poland. There is no room for debate here. Those were the words of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Same sentiment was voiced earlier by Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala and Lithuanian Minister of Defense Dovilė Sakalienė. In your opinion, do you think that the alliance should consider these suggestions, and will we see those aircrafts being shut down?
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, there is an example that everybody should be forced to remember. And that was in 2015 when two Russian jet fighters were shot down by Turkey because they were involved in the Syrian war and they had strayed into Turkish airspace. They were both warned by air traffic control to get out of Turkish airspace. One did, the other didn't. It was brought down by surface-to-air missiles. Everybody died on board. There was a tense period of time between Turkey and NATO and Russia, but the Turks said, they kind of apologized, but they didn't really have to. So I think that really what has to happen now, this is really annoying what Putin is doing. It's demoralizing and it's testing the system. And it's going to make the system less resilient when an actual attack does come. So I think that not only should they be told point blank that no Russian aircraft should ever invade the airspace of a NATO country, and that they will be warned to get out immediately and if not, shot down. But I think also they should probably charge the Russian government for the cost of scrambling all the jets so far, when all the countries have had to scramble them to get up there to shoo them away. And this includes Poland and Estonia and Romania and all the ones that have had to do this. This is just ridiculous, it's childish, and it's got to stop. And, he did not declare war on Turkey as a result of having his plane shot down, because they were wrong. And, and they have to be made to understand this.
But I want to play the devil's advocate here. The situation between Russia and Turkey in 2015 was slightly different from what we're seeing with NATO's eastern flank and Russia today. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, and they weren't foes, they weren't enemies, as is the case now, but even more reason to not tolerate this.
You also mentioned that the countries that would have to scramble the jets in order to shoot down those targets from Russia would have to actually charge Russia for the cost. How do you think they could actually charge them? Where would the money come from?
Well, I think they could take it out of their central bank frozen assets, for starters.
I think a lot of people would back you up on this.
Sue them in the international courts. It's happened before when they've seized property that doesn't belong to them. This happens a lot between nation states. You're not going to collect the money. That's not the point. They have just got to be revealed to be as irresponsible, illegal, unethical, amoral as they are. And, just to say, to read it that they invaded someone's airspace and they were allowed to get away with it. And in one case, I think they're going along, they're patrolling along common airspace over countries like Germany or Poland as well. And, they're just flying around at will wherever they want to go. That's got to stop. And they've got to be told. And there's got to be a very stern system laid out in public that you have 30 seconds to respond. You got the warning and you have a minute to get out, whatever, or else face the consequences.
So today marked a UN Security Council meeting called on by Estonia after those 3 Russian jets entered the airspace for a period of 12 minutes. But Poland and Romania earlier, before that happened, actually saw drones cross into their territory. But we've heard from President Trump, who said this was a mistake. What's your stance on the response of the US president? Do you think that he might be perhaps overlooking the danger?
What did he mean it was a mistake? He was agreeing with the Kremlin that said it was a mistake, the drones that fell in Poland. Is that what he said? Is that what he was commenting on? It was a mistake. I think that's what it was. Well, you don't repeat Kremlin nonsense. The Kremlin, of course, is going to say it's a mistake to cover up the fact that, they intentionally fired. They're testing, and NATO is proving that it's pretty toothless in all of this. Remember, there was another much more serious test, and I don't know what has resulted from that, but there was the plane disabled carrying the EU President von der Leyen. And she was forced to land, and it looks like that was Russian
jamming during her trip to the Baltic states.
That's it, and it was Russian, I think. And so, what has been the consequence of that? They have just, NATO cannot be frightened of them, and that's what he's playing on. And there's got to be a warning system put in place, a specific period of time by which time they have to clear the airspace. All of these planes potentially could have had some terrible weapon on them that they drop. This is not just fooling around and testing. This is a national, international danger to allow them to be in our airspace because they are a lethal, immoral country.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said that extending the protective umbrella over Western Ukraine is a possibility. He also said that the Polish government would support the idea, but the decision would belong to the alliance. Do you think that's a realistic prospect, and what could be the consequences?
Well, I think that, Ukraine needs an iron dome. There's no question. They need some kind of iron dome as Israel has, because they're just getting bombed all the time, constantly. So, yes, I agree with that. I don't know if that relates to the fact that Russia's also testing NATO by incursions, by having jets incursions on their airspace. Let's also remember they're not just doing this in the air, they're doing this on the sea, they're doing this on airwaves, they're doing this on infrastructure. I mean, they have, right now, there's a lot of airports that are probably down in terms of flights in Europe, strictly because of Russian hacking. That's an attack. That is actually an attack, and that could disrupt, and that could cause planes to crash. I mean, they have got to be disciplined and responded to very, very strongly, much more so than is the case already.
I would like us to listen now to a soundbite from a meeting of U.S. President Donald Trump with the Polish President Karol Nawrocki, because I would like to ask you a question. So let's listen to the soundbite now.
Will American soldiers remain in Poland?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, do you know something I don't? I don't know. Yeah, we're very happy. If anything, we'll put more there if they want. But they've long wanted to have a larger presence. We have some countries that have more, not too many, but no, they'll be staying in Poland. We're very much aligned with Poland.
We'll put more there if they want. This was the meeting between the presidents taking place on the 3rd of September this year. Only days ago, we learned that the U.S. is planning to cut funding for NATO presence in the Baltic states. If this scenario materializes, what happens next to this entire region?
Well, they have to be replaced with troops from another NATO member if the Americans withdraw them. He also recently was quoted and was asked, I believe, in the last 2 days by a reporter, if the Baltics are attacked, would you get involved? And he said yes, probably. So sometimes it depends on how the question was asked, but. Is American support against Russia involving Ukraine fading? Yes, we know that is. But that's all the more reason why Europe has to step up.
So you said that in response to my latest question, you said they have to be replaced by other troops. Eastern Sentry, do you think that's an adequate response to what's been happening over the past few days and weeks in this region?
Well, I think the idea of Eastern Sentry is, whether it's adequate in number or strength, I'm not sure about that. I'm not, in a position to be able to evaluate that necessarily. But Eastern Sentry, absolutely, because everybody has to know that Europe is next. The EU countries are next. After the Ukrainian war is over, especially if Ukraine loses more property, more territory, or something like that. But the good news is that I think Russia is losing the war, and a lot of these behaviors, whether it's nipping at the heels of NATO to demoralize and bombing the heck out of Ukraine, I think these may be his last-ditch efforts to try and stop the fact that he's losing the war.
Mm-hmm. Very quickly before we go, do you think that Donald Trump is going to agree to shoot down these planes if they happen to violate airspaces of NATO allies again? What's your opinion?
Well, I think that it's up to NATO as a whole, and with Turkey. I think Turkey did consult under Chapter 4 or whatever it's called, Chapter 4 of the NATO agreement before they shot down Russian planes over their airspace, and I think that has to be in place. So if that requires a meeting of NATO and a consensus that they have, they're in the airspace, they're given one warning, they're given a second warning, and then 30 seconds later they're shot down. Some kind of direct, specific response to incursions has to be made, and that's doable, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, was my guest tonight. Thank you for joining.
Welcome.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you back for another edition tomorrow at 8 p.m. CET.